David, welcome to the Tales of Leadership podcast, brother. I'm excited to have you on, but how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here, and I really love your channel, and all the different guests you've had in the past have been incredibly impressive. And you got my buddy Robert coming on next, so I got to set the stage right and give him a little competition. So, so we're going to have a great conversation. I look forward to today and being with you.
I was thinking about that today. I was kind of reflecting on this journey because I've been podcasting now for almost a year and 3 months, and just all the awesome people that I've gotten the opportunity to talk to that I would not have normally had the opportunity to talk to if I didn't put myself out in this forum. And a lot of that came through some of the conversations that we've had, and those should have been podcasts by themselves because I think we've had like 2-hour phone calls at some time.
Yeah, they've been great and really enlightened in terms of what our expectations are for today, but also how we can have a better impact today as well. So I think they were a great starting point for both of us.
I'm going to start off with a quote because Vice Admiral Sally O'Hare stated that you are the most military connected individual in Washington, D.C. that she has ever met. And I want to set the stage as like listeners be ready because David does everything. And it's almost to the point of where I don't know how you're doing all of that. It's just one person, but I'm excited to kind of dig into all that.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was saying a great place to start is maybe just provide a quick overview to the listeners of who you are.
Again, my name is David Vardeman. I'm a national commercial banker in terms of my job. I'm helping the not-for-profit community from coast to coast. But during my volunteer time, I'm totally dedicated over the last 10 years to the U.S. veteran community. And that includes, joining different veteran service organization boards. I currently sit on 7 of them. I sit on the Association of United States Navy, Navy League of the United States, Navy Safe Harbor Foundation, the National Coast Guard Foundation, Warriors Ethos, Wounded Paw Project, International Leadership Foundation. I'm on 2 national task force, American Legion, Small Business Task Force, and the Citizen Warrior Coalition. It's the reserve organization and all the different branches of the reserves that we support. So that is a pretty hefty lift right there, but I also support 40 veteran service organizations philanthropically, as well as 10 traditional not-for-profits that in different ways tie into the military community, such as cancer research, et cetera. So I'm extremely busy in terms of my volunteerism, intertwined with my national mission, with my work. So everything is all together, but it's all very focused on helping the U.S. veterans, helping the active duty, making their lives better every single day.
Yeah, I love it because it's all connected. And I would love to kind of take it, and it's not even including what you're doing or you plan to do in 2024, because you're helping build the Navy Museum right now, which is a multi-billion-dollar project within DC. So I truly mean this, is that I'm humbled to have you now as a connection. And, hopefully after this podcast, we continue to grow as a friend, because I know that I'm going to be able to learn a lot from you. And when I move up to the big house one day or the Pentagon, I'm probably going to get a chance to see you probably pretty frequently. But it's truly amazing, just all the things you listed. And I always prep every single one of my podcast episodes. And it's usually straightforward. Someone, they go into a career and they have a challenge, and then they reinvent themselves and they do that transition to whatever the passion is. They find that passion. But you, man, are doing so much, and it's truly inspiring. And I think a great way to start, because you work with so many Patriots across all of DoD, defining what leadership is to you. And I'm really curious too, how has that changed with some of the caliber of leaders that you're around every day?
Yeah, I thank you so much, because leadership is very complex to me, and you and I talked for a long time about this, because putting it into words is very complex. So I decided to write it down so we could get it and it would be coherent. And so I'm going to just read what I stated in terms of what I feel leadership is.
Yeah,
Leadership based on my last 10 years in the field, helping everyday active duty and U.S. veterans in need, continues to develop and grow. Based on multiple verticals, I am an expert. My viewpoints of leadership has to do with being the right person at the right time based on one's skills and experience to execute the task successfully in front of them. But most important, have the confidence of those who are looking to you to lead. Courage, sacrifice, vision, accountability, character, and then the execution will define you as a leader on each task throughout one's life.
Mm. You listed so many different types of values through there, and I love that of how you kind of started it off with being the right person at the right time. In leadership, the more I go down this journey, and General Petraeus, when I had him on, really highlighted this fact, is that there's not a set strategy that you can always use to be successful in every job. It's really tailored towards the environment you find yourself in, the team that you're on. Because I'll tell you now, where I work within, SOCOM, my leadership style is completely different than how I was when I was a company commander and I was commanding 250 people, because the level of maturity within the organization, I can be more of myself and less stoic, is a good way of of saying that. But my core values still hold true. And I think that that's one of the critical things within defining leadership, is defining who you are and how you show up. And you do that, I think, by those core values, the things that you just stated and listed out, because those ring true throughout your entire journey. But how you show up is different.
On point. And that is really hard to describe. You could do a cookie cutter version of what is leadership. Look it up in the dictionary and say it and move on with the conversation. It's much more difficult to say, what are the aspects that you're going to need for the rest of your life to be an effective leader? And again, the courage, sacrifice, vision, accountability, character is exactly what you were talking about in terms of your transition from a 250 to what you're doing now. And one of the really great aspects is your life will change dramatically pretty much every 7 years. You're going to be sort of a different person every 7 years, or it could be 6 years too, right? But you're going to have different tasks and different responsibilities. And through that maturity, you're going to have different leadership challenges that are going to face you. And whether or not you can live up to that and execute is going to be based on your core values, like you said. And that is really what I've learned over the last decades of service and working, is that you will change, your responsibilities are going to change. Recently, we had a death of one of the executive directors in one of the not-for-profits I listed. I never in my life thought I was going to have to take over a not-for-profit because I'm handling the finances and take over and sort of run the thing. But I had to take on the leadership role based on my experience and based on the character of the need. And if I didn't do it, who else was going to do it? So it isn't a lifetime commitment, but it is something that I had to execute at the moment. And that was on top of everything else I'm doing, right? But it just had to be done. So somebody has to step up and lead and take care of transactions based on your skill set and based on your capability to execute, and then allowing people to allow you to do that leadership. It will bring it all together into a really nice experience.
I think one of the critical characteristics that defines, I always call a PAL, or a purposeful, accountable leader. And to me, that is someone who leads with transformational leadership styles and is a servant leader. But one of the key characteristics that I've kind of always noticed within leaders is that ability to be unreasonable or bold. And like what you just said, is that you stood up in a time of turbulence, of where most people probably would not have raised their right hand to kind of fill that role, but you understood that your skill set, you're the right person for the right time to fill that void. That's awesome connection.
It's accountability. Like I knew I could handle the accountability of the task. And it's so important as a leader to do those tasks that do fit into your skill set, and not try to do something and try to be the all great leader of society, and handle everything, because different people have different skill sets that you should be a follower and not necessarily the leader at all the different transactions that need to be done. So I do not jump in on every single thing, but this was one I felt like I needed the accountability, and the group needed the protection, and I needed to do it. So sometimes you do need to take a step, but then you take a step back when you're no longer needed, and that's part of leadership as well.
I have a concept. We haven't even gotten any questions so far, right? Is I call it the rule of sledgehammer, and as a leader, being a sledgehammer, but you're not always applying that type of mentality. You only
Right.
apply that
Absolutely.
mentality when you need to, because you still need to hold your team accountable. But when they get to a certain point of where they're stretched beyond their capacity, that's when the leader steps in and they have a sledgehammer mentality. They break through that obstacle or whatever mental barrier the team's in, and then they hold their team accountable. All right, figure out a system or a process that will not allow that to happen again, and give the ball back to their court. You kind of like just slowly sink away back into the shadows.
And what you're saying is great, because that applies to both, the civilian
Yeah,
leadership as well as military. It is really, some great stuff. And I think that's what I was doing on this particular, but I've learned that you have to do that all throughout the different transactions that you may be leading, where it's push, pull back, and make sure that people
yeah,
are still with you through the whole process, because you don't want to alienate somebody, during the process and lose their insight, just because you're pushing everything forward, right? So I try to balance and be soft and and tough all at the same time with everybody I deal with.
ooh,
Yeah,
so
I do
that's,
make mistakes. I do make mistakes, and so that's
yeah,
another part of being a real leader. I think is not only allowing mistakes, but also making them yourselves. Because how are you supposed to
yeah.
grow without mistakes, right? So I made all the mistakes in the world, and so I think that in terms of the military and how that ties into the military is we were discussing back in
Mm,
the 2014, 13, 15 range, when it was open with the U.S. Army and the Navy. We're talking about allowing their people to make mistakes, but not holding them to an
yeah.
accountability where it ruins their career or ruins their esteem. And so I think that we need to sort of get back to those conversations with the military, and how we're treating people as they come through in their 20s. Everybody in their 20s mess up, right? And everybody in their 30s have their moments, right? So their leadership moments when they want to be a little bit more aggressive, right?
Yeah.
So I think we as leaders, and also flag officers, all the way down to the colonel level and major level, we all have to like think about, how do we want to discipline, how do we want to bring these young people up in a way that we do not knock themselves down to the point where they become unconfident, or that second guess their good intentions and good decisions.
There was one organization that I worked for, and it was hands down one of the best jobs that I've ever had in the Army. And I say that because the Army gave me keys to a Humvee, and I had no one supervising me, and I was in Fort Polk, Louisiana. It's been renamed now, but we'll just say that there may or may not been some mudding that happened in Fort Polk, right? But that was such a beautiful example when we were talking on the phone of failing, and then understanding that the importance of failing. And me now having a master's degree in engineering, I see even more of a correlation is that what is engineering if it is not to fail? Fail small and fail quickly, so then you can identify the problem, isolate it, and improve and grow. And what the Army does, or at least, when I was in the operational side, especially at those CTC rotations, they did a really good job of stretching a brigade combat team to the point of failure, because they wanted to take you to the point where you were going to fail, mentally, physically, logistically, so you could identify those issues, those pain points of where, hey, this is why you failed. So when you go actually deploy, if you were going to Iraq or Syria or wherever, you would not experience that same type of negative event when it actually mattered. And we would do a really good job of capturing those lessons learned all the way at a platoon to a brigade after action review, and capturing those feedbacks. But I think what you just said is that leaders nowadays, at least what I've seen, is they're afraid to give the authority to their subordinate leaders. to make those types of decisions because they kind of want to hoard them. And
Mhm.
I see that a lot within the acquisition field is that, the bureaucracy that we live in gives leaders a tremendous amount of power. And when you have that power, it's very hard to give it away. But to be an effective leader, you have to be able to do that. And with that, there's going to be failure and there's going to be a lot of it. But as long as you don't violate a core value of your organization, of what you're trying to build within the culture and the climate, I think it's okay to allow that individual to fail because at the end of the day, they're being fortified through fire. They're going to come out stronger. They're going to become out a better individual, and you're grooming the future leaders in your organization.
What are you saying? You're saying that you trained before you
Yeah,
went overseas. And so you were prepared and you had the failure here. That's the same in all the different elements, correct?
yeah,
So why not push them? Why not allow them to fail and learn and grow and develop as an individual? Because these are the future leaders of our nation. And if we do not allow them to understand that they not only have to learn through trial and error, but the
yeah.
people coming up after them have to learn through trial and error. So how are we going to build a really strong culture when we're not allowing people to embrace their their own potential? So and also push their own potential. So I think this is exciting if we can get the thought process back to where we were, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago when we were really pushing that element of allowing people to grow and develop and fail and continue to move and forge forward. And so that is sort of an off topic of leadership, but something very important to what we're doing, as not only in the civilian world, but also in terms of the mentor civilian world, as well as what's going on in the military. So I think
This is why I was just saying, and this is why I love talking to you because, like, we haven't literally gotten to any of the questions that I've written down, but every time I talk to you, you fire me up because
Mhm.
we share the same passion. And yesterday, I took a test, the resiliency based leadership program. I got certified on that last night. It was a 4 hour
Awesome,
exam.
congratulations, Gabe.
Yeah, and the dude at the end is like, "How do you feel?" It's like I feel fired up because
Mhm.
we're talking about stuff that I love. So I'm going to shut up so we don't derail the conversation. But
Okay.
I would love to kind of get into where your leadership journey started. Starting off at James Madison University, you graduate
Mhm.
through there, and then you enter the banking field. And I
Yes, I
think
did. Yeah.
you started off with like 54 employees. Is when you first entered into banking.
When I entered banking, I did it because I had to get health insurance, and then things just progressed very quickly, and then I ended up, you know, leading, and then I ended up leading a group of individuals on Capitol Hill, and before
Mm,
that, I was developing and growing as an individual national banker and leading the nation in commercial banking in a different company that I was working for at that time. So I really became extremely good at what I did, during my independent sales. It's a sort of an independent sales, national commercial banking relationship manager type job. And so
mm,
then I went to Capitol Hill, and then I started managing lots of different people in terms of starting a private banking initiative. And then when I was on Capitol Hill, I worked with Muhammad Yunus and others on micro lending. The only reason I bring that up is there could be a government shutdown coming up, and
yeah.
we started the micro lending program for the Capitol Police and the architect of the Capitol. So I was really involved with how do I help people, and that really brought my patriotism back. Because I
Mm,
grew up as a Navy with a Navy family, and I was very very patriotic. And then I got on Capitol Hill, and I actually started wearing my American flag that you see over here on my lapel. Because I wanted people, when they came to Washington D.C. and came to the Capitol, they would see that people are patriotic and really loving their country. And so that started it all back. And then sort of the rest is history when I left, because then I joined a private business bank, and I began my work with the wounded warriors and with Navy Safe Harbor. And it just sort of snowballed from there to what it is today. And so
mm,
it's 10 years of a lot of hard work. It's 10 years of really dedicated day to day, face-to-face interaction with veterans and senior leadership of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, all the way down, with the American Legion, down with the, infantry. And so it's really encompassed the entire military community. There is not one branch I do not help more than the other branches. And I'm very, very dedicated to making people's lives better. And I did that through a lot of hard work, trial and error, but also have come up with a philosophy that we talked about before in terms of what is important to me and how I engage the public. And I think it's really important that I share that with you. That is tied into the three esteems of both a soldier or a sailor, and or young people coming up in all of life. But let's just focus in on the sailors and the soldiers. The three critical elements of esteem I decided I had to tackle, and that was personal spiritual esteem, occupational esteem, and physical fitness esteem. And so by focusing in on those three esteems in terms of what I wanted to accomplish, I was able to build a network of 40 to 45 veteran service organizations that sort of encompass one of those values. And they encompass it in all different ways. And it allowed me a really strong focus of what am I doing, why am I doing it, and how am I leading, to help as many people as I possibly can. And it really has blossomed into something extremely special and once in a lifetime. I can honestly say that I'm the top national banker of military affairs in the nation. I can say that with all due confidence because I don't know anything close to what I'm doing. And but it's very strategic and it's very smart, and it's all tied into a leadership concept of how do you be one person and impact as many people as humanly possible. And I can dive deeper into that if you have questions regarding those esteems and what I'm really an expert on at this time.
Yeah, and when we were talking before, is that something very similar that I have about having fulfillment in life between work, family, self. I joked with you before is that I'm just a simple infantryman and I keep everything KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? Is that to me, anyone that that I work with, and especially with me, you have to be able to have a harmonious life between work of what occupational, family, which I think falls within that personal space, and then and spiritual, and then and self, which is right? Like you have to be able to serve yourself. And when I was always in the zone or switched on, I had a healthy balance between all of those. It wasn't perfectly balanced because life is never balanced in that way. And it's always seasons of life. Maybe our occupational is going to require more time. Maybe our spiritual is going to require more time because we're going through a challenging situation and we need to turn to Christ. Or maybe someone else needs help and we have to be able to do that. But walk me through, how did you develop those three pillars, that framework?
I think I was seeing what was struggling with veterans on a day-to-day basis. And of course you have, the elephant in the room is, the suicide prevention. I specialized in that for 5 years. And that's sort of how I sort of encompass these three, because I saw after those 5 years of really digging deep and trying to do my very best to help people, I found that I have to help all the other organizations and groups to help them in order to get a maximized effort out there and with different ideas and different techniques in order to help U.S. veterans in active duty have a better, healthy day-to-day life. Okay. So then I said, okay, what is one of the big stressors that we all go through life from 18 to the maybe 65, and that's occupational and esteem. Do you feel good about your job? And then I was thinking, when the people are transitioning out, are they having a good experience? And I found out that 8 out of 9 veterans that leave only last in their first job for 9 months, right?
Yeah.
Well, instead of just preaching it, I actually engaged in practicing. I joined Warriors Ethos, which is a military transition group that is run by Jared Shepard and General Clark and Medal of Honor recipient Flo Groberg. And it
Wow.
really gave me some really strong knowledge over the last 5 years of the struggles and the needs of a U.S. Veteran transitioning into the workforce. And how
Mm.
do I make their journey better? And how do I make it more comfortable in terms of their transition? And am I there? What's even more important, am I there after the 9 months? Okay, because that's when the trouble begins
Yeah.
on suicide prevention. Okay, they're all happy they got their first job. Okay, but then they find that that isn't the right fit. That isn't the spiritual fit. That isn't giving them the physical fitness ability that they're looking for. Correct.
Yeah.
So they become out of balance. And so we have to be there for them when they become out of balance to get them back on the track where they're more comfortable in terms of what they want to do with their life. Because I guarantee you, they're more focused 9 months after than they are right when they get out. And one thing I do want to say is I deal with flag officers from 4 stars all the way down to infantry, and everybody's anxiety is consistent.
Mm.
I talk to 4 stars that are about to get out who say the same stick as an infantry guy about to get out. Maybe the infantry guy is a little bit more anxious about getting that first job, but their anxiety levels, everything about their purpose, everything about their contribution to the nation is all very similar. And we have to be much more in tune with that and be able to really be patient with them and be really focused on helping them, during that time. So I think that explains sort of why I got into the occupational esteem issue. I do help groups like Boots to Books out in California. And I'm
Yeah.
interested in a lot of different organizations throughout the nation, hiring our heroes with Admiral Adam Rock. There are different people that I want to help. But so I'm very in tune with this whole issue and how the different programs are going. I do believe in all the different programs, and they all sort of serve a different purpose, which I think is really fascinating. And how we get the best practices of all of them is something I need to work on in the future. But right now, I'm just focused on making a difference in occupational transition, and this will help save lives. Somebody who has a purpose, somebody who is in tune with what they want to do with the rest of their life will really help guide them to the spiritual softness that will help them, help them with some of their negative feelings. I can get more into that whole other issue because that's a very deep one, but these are the things that I'm doing to try to help veterans on the occupational side. On the physical fitness side, I join energies with groups like Warriors Rising,
Yep.
and also Catch a Lift Fund. These different groups, give veterans an opportunity to regain their health and physical fitness through different programs that bring them up in terms of it's always better when, don't you feel better when you're working out and you're not overweight. I mean, I do. Like, I'm dying to start working out.
100%. I'm like a diva. Those Snicker commercials, if I don't work out in a day, I get sassy. That's the best way to define it.
And for me, I've been working so hard on this Veterans Day. I think I've been like doing and going to these dinners and drinking and eating, food for the
You
last
blow my mind.
months.
Every day on LinkedIn, you post this amazing picture of an amazing event gala that you're always attending. I'm like, I
Yeah,
think David is the most interesting man in the world. Like those commercials, it's like that's you.
it's like it's been a very wonderful, intense, but like heavy weight gaining last
Mm,
2 weeks. And so I'm also in tune with I have to be physically, you have to practice what
yeah,
you preach. I
yeah,
have to be on point with my occupation. I have to be physically fit, and then I also have to work on spirituality. And the spirituality elements, I deal with TAPS, and in terms of the Gold Star bereavement programs throughout the nation, and I try to build people up through Navy Safe Harbor Foundation and the
yeah,
Warrior Games, and making people who are injured feel better about themselves, community. So there's all sorts of different spiritual, and I also have become extremely spiritual because of this experience, because I've had all sorts of wonderful interventions, in terms of my experience in helping people and where that has led. And it's only made me super strong spiritually because there's no question in my mind that we're being watched and that our actions are being judged. So I think
yeah.
think that really is inspiring in itself. So, we believe in the spiritual, occupational, physical. If you try it as yourself, you're going to find out how hard it is to really balance all three. And we have to put that in perspective as somebody who is out of balance and what they're going through, and be empathetic and engage. And that is what I've been doing the last 10 years in terms of trying to create programs and support all these 40 different VSOs in order to make a really powerful, impactful difference for as many lives as I humanly possibly can.
I think that's one of the most impactful missions that you're currently on is the suicide prevention within the U.S. military, because that is something that is near and dear to my heart. Because I've had more friends that I can count that have committed suicide. And it always is through those transition points. And it's just the same in the battlefield. What is the most dangerous time in a combat operation? Is those transition points. When you're entering or you're exiting or you're transitioning from offensive to defensive operations, that's when darkness can creep in. That's when the enemy gets a vote, because that's when you're most vulnerable. And we need more people like you that are willing to use the resources that they have for good and help save lives, and to kind of shape this even more powerful. How many soldiers, and don't take this as a quote because this probably isn't spot on, but it's pretty close, did we lose in Iraq and Afghanistan, the 20 plus years?
Like 4,000.
Yeah, like between 6 to 7,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do the math, and I'm sure you're a banker, so you can probably do the public math on this one. 22 veterans a day for that 20 plus years committed suicide.
Crazy.
That's over 160,000 soldiers that could have been, maybe not all of them we could have helped, but a good portion of those can. That's what I do. What I do is because I believe that if I can help show leaders a better way to lead with a servant leadership style that uses meekness as the power within leadership, and you don't always have to be an alpha, then maybe that can touch someone's life and save someone's life, because everything rises and falls on leadership. And I love how you talked about that, is that you had to learn to lead yourself with this framework, practice what you preach before you go start to talk to other people, because that is absolutely essential, because you show up authentically. And if you weren't practicing what you're preaching, and you weren't giving that type of advice or guidance, people would see through that. They would see that you weren't your authentic self. So I love that. I love everything you're doing with that.
Yeah, everything I'm doing is totally authentic, because what am I gaining? I'm not gaining financial wealth. Right? No. It's all about doing and being a patriot to the United States. Yeah. That's what it's all about. I mean, we live in the best country in the world. We shouldn't be going through 22 a day, right?
Yeah.
So we have to think about, and there was a very famous man. He asked me what was the number one best practice. There is no number one best practice.
No, there's not.
Every individual is so unique, and this is not something I wanted to learn. Okay, when you're diving into the topic, you want to save lives, you want to stop it, right? Yeah. But every soul is so unique that it's very difficult to identify. I'm on Navy Safe Harbor Foundation Board. We recognize the number one wounded warrior out of the 10,000 throughout our nation. And one of them suffered with PTSD, but they were put at the very pinnacle of the United States Navy. That person tragically, and I was always worried about that person because they were over emotional, right? And I was like, why are you hugging everybody? And it was just sort of strange. And I was a little worried about him. And, he did commit suicide 2 years later, right? So and he was the pinnacle. Okay, he was the person that we all said was the very defined recovery. Okay, so it's very hard to pinpoint and say this person's healthy, this person is not. What we can do is create better environment and better programs that make it easier or bring purpose or camaraderie. What's the right word when you're all together? Bring people camaraderie. Thank you. I was just mispronouncing it. But bringing everybody together, in a common good. And I think we're getting there, and I think we're doing better. And one thing I do want to, state with regards to suicide with women, right? Women's numbers were going up and up and up. And the reason was not because they were in combat, right? The reasons was the PTSD in their childhood was being triggered by events that were taking place in their workplaces in the military. Okay, so
Oh,
they were
wow.
having flashbacks and bad elements. So how do you identify that, and how do you identify that in the military, right?
Yeah.
So I think this issue is so much more complex and so much more difficult, and so much more challenging for individuals just getting involved in it, saying, I want to make a difference, right? In
Yeah.
all good intentions, right? I think sometimes we have to really think about how we can impact. And that impact may be helping TAPS, it may be helping Headstrong, it might be helping some other group that is researching also the fight flight syndrome, which is being studied right now in
Yeah.
intensely. Right? That getting better research on that, so we can maybe detox people when they come out of the military in order to protect them in terms of their own harm to themselves. So all of these things intertwine need to be done more effectively now that we know so much more now. Does that make sense? And then
No.
that is a toughie right there, what I just said. That is a really difficult thing for us to pull together and be able to execute. But the time is over for
Yeah.
people doing push-ups 2,200 a day,
Yeah.
or the time for that is over. The time for
Yeah.
action and the time for us to engage with the education that we've learned over the last 10 years needs to begin.
Yep.
And so I challenge the VA and other people of power that if you want to make a difference, we have a lot of great programs and research. And how do you identify, an individual in the Headstrong at a national gallery? A guy threw himself off the building and somehow survived, and they put these guys up on stage and say, "Why did you commit suicide?" But he said the world would be better off if I'm not here, and that has
Mm,
always stuck in my head, in terms of where somebody's mind is, when they do the ultimate deed, and can we touch more of those people because he regrets doing what he did. So if people regret, afterwards what they did, I've never heard somebody say, I wish, I'm happy with what I did. And if they could see the impact it has on the families, like I can't even tell you all the bereavement programs I've started
yeah.
to help the family members of the suicide, because they're devastated. Okay. So I think that's where we have to have better education in lines, even underneath everything, somehow. I think, the Coast Guard with their mental resilience program. Mental resilience is code for suicide prevention now in the military.
Yeah.
But they try. They're doing wonderful work with the chaplains and trying to get, at least the stigma discussion, lowered. And so they're probably the best group that I've seen in the different verticals engaged right now in trying to address the issue. But it's so complex, and I've just gone on and talked about it for a while because I've been working on it for 10 years. But
Yeah.
but don't underestimate, if you want to get involved in this topic, if you want to really make a difference in this topic, how much you have to learn in order to have your skill set and your talents put in the right place within this extremely complex. But we do. I totally believe we have to bring this 22 number down because it has not changed one bit since I started 10 years on the process. So obviously, maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe obviously the nation has to do something better. But it's very, very complex.
But I think you hit the nail on the head, is that everyone uses these, I think, for selfish purposes. Like when the ice bucket challenge came out for ALMS, right? Like everyone
Mhm.
was on social media and they were doing all these ice bucket challenges and the push up, doing 22 a day. But you lose the true purpose of it, is that you're challenging someone to do something, and then they're looking at it from a more selfish lens. In terms of like the social media following, the dopamine clicks that we're going to get for the likes that we're going to put in there. But people have times, they have talents, and they have treasures. We all have those. How can we leverage our time, our talents, and our treasures to actually make a difference? And to hit your nail, what you just said is there are so many resources out there and ways to actually put resources in people's hands that are in that dark space. But we're focused more on promoting just a concept, 22 push-ups a day to bring awareness. Okay, we've got awareness, bro. what are you
Yeah, I
doing?
think we have plenty of awareness.
Yeah. So every time like one of my friends would always like tag me in one of those, I would just never respond. But it was like, cause I'm using my influence that I have limited, and some of the talents that I possess that's God given to make a difference. That's the whole purpose of doing this podcast is like, I'm hoping to reach people out there and build better leaders, and the same thing what you're trying to do.
Right,
Um,
and people struggle with their spiritual esteem, but and they may say, the world is better off with them, no, without them, with them, but the world is not better off without you, because each individual and each spirit brings, uniqueness and perspective, and they have people who love them and their family, and people who love them in their workplace and their
yeah.
lives, and to turn their head on back, or to turn their thought process away from that and into something dark, you know, um, is something that they should really consider what their actions will lead to,
Yeah.
um, if they can. And so there becomes the medical part, where the medical people have to have their place, right? They need to have these people, possibly looked at and spoken to professionally in order for them
Mm,
to work through the things I just stated, right?
yeah.
And so everybody has their role in place, and we have to be sure to provide the proper medical and psychology support to these individuals that are in need.
Yeah.
And trust me, when I visited the different posts throughout the nation, I won't say which branch, but as I visited the posts, people will come up to me in the strangest moments and say, you know what, my staff is really struggling because of
Yeah.
ADC. And these are not combat staffs. These are people that have to deal with the public and in
Yeah.
emergency situations, right? So it's across the board, I find. And so
Yeah.
that worries me a little bit, that it's not this whole concept that it's PTSD, brain trauma, veterans that are over, fighting ISIS. It's people throughout the entire military for different
Yeah.
reasons that are struggling. And how we begin to really address that is something that will only strengthen the United States military and strengthen the
100%.
individuals. Somebody who is both has personal esteem, spiritual, occupational, physical, is a lot stronger individual than somebody who's struggling in all three, right? So
Yeah.
so I think if we can build people and build the soldiers and the sailors with that type of attitude, you've got a really powerful force going at whoever you're going after. So,
That framework, we just circled back to it, and that is the critical piece. And I know of general officers that's committed suicide. I know of majors and
yeah,
colonels who've had mental breakdowns,
these
like
guys,
hiding under their bunk in a training situation because they just did not want to be found. And I know that, but because we ask so much of our nation's greatest resource, and it's the men and women who serve, and you are one of those. I would consider you, a patriot who serves their country. We ask so much, and we often give them so little in terms of resources to actually accomplish the mission. And so to kind of give you kind of a brain, to frame this. My current job that I'm in right now, my team of 3 people is managing 34 acquisition programs, which is just insane when you think about, PO Aviation in Huntsville, Alabama. PMUAS has 36 or 34 programs, and that's a 360 man person organization. I have 3 people and I manage 34 programs, but I do it for such a unique organization that I will find a way to yes. We will find a way to yes. And that level of time that it takes to do that and be intentional, you lose yourself. So you
right.
have to have a framework that you can balance yourself with. Yours and mine is exactly the same. Mine's a little bit more rudimentary because it's more basic. Keeping that kiss missing, but I love that. But I'd love to kind of steer it now, to your philanthropic philosophy. So, what is a philanthropist, first of all, and then what drove you to serve so deeply within the veteran community?
Really, I've been trained with I've been mentored by some of the great philanthropists of our time.
Yeah,
Dr. Jack London, helped me, guide me in terms of how he guided CACI in terms of their sponsorships and what they do. And so he helped guide me what's great about mentorship is, you listen to all what they say, and then
Yeah.
you sort of do what you want to do, but you take in their efforts and their knowledge. So I didn't do exactly what he said, but it gave me a framework to do it, maybe 70% of what he said, right? Or
Mm,
80%. And that really helped me. So getting mentorship on terms of when everybody's coming after you for money, how to balance and make decisions that will make everyone feel good about your contribution, but also
yeah.
maximize your capability, right? So without him, I would not have been able to execute the last 5 years as efficiently as I have. So he passed away. He was the chairman of the board of CACI and a billionaire and just a wonderful man. And now his wife, Dr. Jennifer London, is running his philanthropic work now. But
Mm,
he really helped guide me. So does that answer the question of how like I got started and the guidance of how to distribute the funding? And that's a small piece of what that's sort of a piece of what I do, but now I'm more of a proactive action individual engaging in the not-for-profits. And what I've been doing lately is helping them with grant work. So I can help them with their grant work, which will provide them much more money than what I could provide philanthropically myself. So I'm
yeah.
sort of taking it to another whole level in terms of
Yeah.
volunteerism, where I'm getting them the opportunities based on the different opportunities throughout the nation for their particular mission, and I'm helping them with their grant work, and that is much more beneficial than my actual philanthropic work. The philanthropic work helps certain little needs that are needed throughout a year for an
Yeah.
organization, but it doesn't make the organization, if that makes sense. What does make sense is more of the grant providing an annual income that they'll get from that is far greater than anything I could get. So that's sort of my growth as a leader is learning that piece and being able to expand my model of how to assist people outside of just my time or treasure, right? So I'm doing a lot more than just philanthropic work. It's far greater than that, and also
Oh,
the contribution of the knowledge of how a not-for-profit works is very beneficial now.
that's another thing too, is that so this is just another resource that a veteran could be listening to of trying to figure out for transition purposes. I've seen now working with so many organizations that develop material solutions for military problems that are veteran companies, and they're all amazing people. But some of those, it's hard. It is hard for a new company to start with the level of resources that it required for a small business to kind of stand up and get
Mhm.
going. And I think about like how many small businesses fail. And I think through the lens of an entrepreneur usually fails 3 to 4 times before they finally hit their stride and become
Mhm.
successful. It's,
Absolutely.
fail small, fail often, and grow every single time. So I love that concept of that you're providing another amazing resource for the veteran based kind of communities. And I think what 40 over 40 programs right now or organizations that you currently
Right. Yeah,
serve.
I help a lot of different programs, and
That's
they're all
crazy.
amazing, and they're all very different, and they all engage in one of the three aspects we were talking about.
Yeah.
The transition and occupational is dear to my heart, due to the fact that people do. There's also the transition into entrepreneurism, and
Yeah.
I'm very involved with groups like Veterans Growing America and the American Legion. I'm working extremely hard on the GI Bill to expand that to entrepreneurial funding. So I'm working with the American Legion on that right now in terms of legislation. So
Mm,
it's all about how do we make the experience of people who don't want to go the traditional route and get the resume and go. What if a young man wants to get out and go and start his own business? Well, how are we going
yeah.
to help him on that, right? So I'm working really hard on trying to provide verticals that will allow them to explore and fail, right? But also explore and try the different elements of entrepreneurism that they want. Um, because entrepreneurism really is a key to the veteran community, because you guys are great at starting businesses, because when you get out, you want your mission and you want your purpose to be part
Yeah.
of something that is useful to the nation. Whether it's Danielle Jones starting, Veterans Growing America, right? He was a command sergeant major for the United States Army, and now he pulled all these people together, and they're all selling their goods, and they're all veterans, right? Well, these are wonderful concepts, and and the possibility of entrepreneurialism needs to become more real, and
Yeah.
a little bit more easier access to capital. That's something I'm working really hard on with the American Legion. Okay. And we're coming up with really unique ideas, because if we can do the PPP loan and give out $1 trillion, we can come up with a concept that uses cash as collateralization to help businesses get going. So these are, but not have risk to the banks and the people and the different groups that are borrowing the money. So these are concepts that we have to work on and try to make happen for the young people coming out that want to start their own business. So I want it to be an equal element. Start your own business. If you want to go through the traditional route of getting a job, it's up to you, but we will help you one way or the other.
I love that.
That would be the ultimate goal.
You made a beautiful transition, because I was going to ask you, walk me through some of your current efforts that you have with the American Legion. But I want to say that I am going to have to pick up my game when it comes to serving. So my wife and I break so the 3 areas that we talked about: work, family, self. I take it even further, and you're going to love this. I call it the 7 F's, right? So so fun, friends, filled, finance, fitness, faith, and family. And we set definable SPARK matrix every single year that's 10 years out. So long-term vision for our family. And every year we have communities that we want to serve. So Arlington for this year, I would love to take my family to go hang reefs, so I can help connect the head, heart, and hand alignment.
Did you see? I just did a reef for.
I did, and I was peanut butter and jelly. I'm living vicariously through your LinkedIn. But I'm going to have to.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's a great once in a lifetime moment.
Yeah, I knew that was. I think we talked on the phone right before that event. You didn't know necessarily what was going to happen.
Yes, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know I was going to lay a reef and walk, the sacred steps of the tomb of the unknown soldier.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really once in a lifetime. And again, it's participating, it's action, it's dedication to one's nation. These things do not happen, and they are not given to people that aren't engaged. So if you want to make a difference, you got to get out, and you got to stop complaining about how bad some conception about how bad things are. They aren't bad at all. When you go to the Arlington National Cemetery and you see all the people that served, all the people that passed away due to their service, and honoring them, you'll have a whole different perspective of how great our nation is, because it is the greatest nation in the world.
I had no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was done.
Well, I was saying I had a very humbling experience, when I first joined the military, and I blessed and cursed, I guess, in the way of the platoon that I took over in Afghanistan. My first interaction with them was at Sergeant Rodriguez's memorial. And if you've ever attended a service member's memorial in Garrison, it is a very emotionally charged fair. Now, do that in a combat zone.
Mm-hmm.
It is a whole other level. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know the platoon that I was going on, but I saw the company commander in tears, barely being able to talk, the platoon leader in tears, barely able to talk, 120 barrel-chested freedom fighters that I probably didn't have any headspace and timing to truly understand how great those men were at that moment in time, just on their knees. And then when I went through that, it changed me. It changed my whole life of how I viewed leadership, because I was coming in that role of having a very selfish mentality of how can I do as good as I possibly can so I can go serve as a platoon leader in 75th Ranger Regiment and go do all these things that I wanted to do. In that moment, it stopped me in my tracks and made me think about, I'm here to serve. So how can I serve this team the best possible way that I can? And being able to go to Arlington, I think for my family would probably be able to do that same connection, because it's hard to show that to people who don't
Yes.
understand or live it.
Mhm.
You have to
Yeah.
see it.
Mhm.
You know?
And it is an amazing sight, and every American should have to go there. We talked a little bit
Yeah,
about shared experience and the loss of shared experience and how that's affecting our nation.
yeah,
And that's another whole topic maybe for another day.
yeah,
But yeah, I think you're sort of tapping into that. You have to have that shared experience that you had with
yeah,
those soldiers on the battlefield. Um, my shared experiences is seeing families, on their knees because their child committed suicide,
yeah,
and they sent them off to the army, or they feel their own guilt and family guilt of what occurred. Okay, so all of these things are intertwined in terms of service and learning through experience, and also learning by not being selfish and embracing all the different groups throughout the nation, and treating them
yeah,
all like your brothers and sisters, because we
yeah,
all souls and within the vehicle, and we start and we finish, right? So there's absolutely nothing to be jealous about. I did talk to you a little bit. Sally and I talk about jealousy and how that affects leadership, and you
mm,
have to rise above it, but you also have to be aware of it because it can be damaging toward your greater good. The
yeah,
people that are possibly jealous of me, they done anything to help anybody other than themselves? Probably not, right? But they can cause damage towards all the good that I'm doing. So I cannot ignore it. And a lot of people say just ignore those people. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, those people, you cannot ignore them. You have to engage them. You have to maybe try to win them over by doing something nice for one of their friends, or bring a common experience to all of them, and it will make a huge difference because it has where I've worked.
yeah.
Okay. So these are things that leadership. I know I'm sort of tying some things together here at the very end, but I just wanted to get some of those challenges that I've faced, and how I've overcome them through
So
hard work and showing people what I'm doing. And when they see that, the jealousy sort of goes away, and admiration and more dignity come in.
I think every episode has a theme. Every person that I get to talk to and just listen to their incredible story has a theme. And yours, I would sum up, is character and consistency. That you have an unwavering character because you know who you are and how you want to show up and with the changes that you want to make, and you are consistent. And throughout your entire journey, you were consistent. You said something there too that I think this nation needs to hear more of, is that we're all one team, one fight. Doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. We are all Americans. And put any of us in a country that does not like Americans, and they would treat you exactly the same. And I really wish that we had. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but mandatory service requirements.
No, I'm
To,
all
to
into it.
yeah,
Me and
there's
General McChrystal, we're all into it. So
because
you're not alone. Don't feel bad.
a shared purpose.
Yeah.
But I've worked with some amazing people throughout my time in the military, and one thing that was never brought up was race. Never brought up. You could be with refugees from different countries who came to serve here because they wanted to come from Haiti. I had several soldiers that were from or Haitian directly from Haiti, some of the best soldiers I've ever had, hands down. I had immigrants from Vietnam be in my formation. I've had people from the inner city of Chicago and Detroit, and I had like good old farm boys from Nebraska. But everyone
Mhm.
came together, and why did they come together? Because they had shared suffering and pain, but they also had a shared purpose. And I think as a country, we're kind of missing that. And the unfortunate thing about most of the time of when we do truly come together is through a tragic event. So think about like
Mhm.
9/11, of that camaraderie that we had about being an American. Well, that required a deep sacrifice to this nation to get back to that. And I'm hoping that we don't have to go to that level to recreate that bond. But what you just said, this country and honestly this world just needs to hear more of that type of message.
And the rookie of the year for the Baltimore Orioles got Al Bunbury. He
Yeah.
played with Cal Ripken, won a World Series in 1968. He was possibly the first platoon leader in Vietnam, African American, in
Ooh.
1968. And he stated that, exactly what you stated. He
Yep.
said there was no racism. I was just in charge of getting these boys home alive. That's all
Mm,
he said. So, this is a timeless gift that, the military gets, that 1% of seeing everybody as equal, and seeing everybody for their character and their ability to protect one another, and not race.
yeah.
And my growing up in DC sort of spoiled me, where I've been, with the different races and nationalities of the entire world all the time, right? So that's never really been part of my vocabulary. But again, if we had shared experience, if everybody did have to pull together at the age of 18 and 19, we would have a stronger sense of self, and
Mm,
also a stronger sense of national pride. And
yeah.
I see it in Greece. I see it in different countries throughout the world where service mandatory. You see it in Israel, that
Yeah.
where service mandatory is mandatory. So this is not something we have to do in terms of military only. We can also do it for serving in your community, or serving
Yeah.
in
100%.
maybe at a different state, but serving community, and all doing it together as one. So that is something that I do endorse as well, only because I know the shared experience will make our nation stronger. And it's not to put a burden on any young person; they will get paid to do it, right?
Yeah.
Just have that option have that shared experience would really help bring everybody together, instead of continuing to have those people being pulled apart based on something that isn't relevant toward national survival, right? So
I'm going to tell you that I'm looking at the clock. I can't believe it's already an hour.
yeah,
And we've talked about this, is that we would be able to do a podcast recording for probably over 2 hours and rival Joe Rogan, right?
easy.
I have a hard
Mhm.
stop at 7:15,
Mhm.
but I don't want this conversation to end because I have so many dang questions that I haven't even been able to bring up. So I'll pose this one. Walk me through some
Mhm.
of the awesome projects that you're working in 2024 that's coming up.
Well, 2024, I'm going to be working with the American Legion on the GI Bill and the
Yeah.
Access to Capital for entrepreneurial veterans, as a pilot program, and sort of taking some of the concepts that we learned in PPP program,
Yeah.
and discussing those throughout the Legion to construct realistic legislation that would not be presented by me, of course. It'd be presented by
Mm,
professional people that lobby these different laws. But we're working on that. That's really interesting. I'm working on the Navy Museum project. It's $1 billion facility off the wharf. I'm working very closely with your friend and future friend Robert Irvine, who is also deeply involved with that project. But I'm doing a lot of fundraising for them, and determined to make that impact as well as I can do with regards to that. And it's really dear to my heart, with the family being Navy in the past. The Citizen Warrior Coalition is for the reserves. So I'm going to be helping the reserves and educating businesses on the law of what they can do, and how they hire, and how they have to keep them hired. And also, no negativity toward their employment, and their obligations to the nation. So we have to do a better job globally over the entire nation, in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, for retention purposes, which are critical to the preparation and the preparedness of our nation's military in terms of conflict.
yeah.
That just goes without saying. Okay,
Yeah.
so
100%.
so I'm going to be working on that really hard. I'm working on the Wounded Paw Project. It's an anti-dogfighting ring, and people might say,
Mm,
"How is that military?" Well, it's tied with human trafficking, and every negative thing you can think of in society is tied to that type of
yeah.
activities. So it brings me back with law enforcement, which I was involved with in the past, and a lot of other FBI, CIA, and will help me educate myself more on the whole topic of human trafficking, and how the military is trying to combat that as well. And
Mm,
then finally, I'm working on two more. American GI Forum. I'm going to be working really closely with them, with their initiatives throughout the year. And of course, on the Coast Guard Foundation board, I'll be working with them with the mental resilience programs, with the senior leadership there, as well as the board, and trying to make a difference again with helping people before they become critical, and trying to identify them before their mental problems become more serious, and trying to curve and come up with some really good best practices to spread throughout all the different branches. So that is some of what I'm going to be doing next year, which is new, which I'm very excited about. I still have all my other traditional things I'm doing. But it's going to be really busy, right? And but this, I wouldn't want it any other way, and this is what I really want to engage in, and I'm passionate about making a difference. I do blend this in with my full-time job, and I'm going to be really focused on that as well next year. But I think that it's going to be a great 2024 because all these initiatives are so special and needed, and I think I'm going to make a really strong national impact. So I'm moving more from local, helping out like local groups and to really engaging in national issues.
Yeah. You let me know if you need any free service, and I'm going to get the McMillian clan out there to go help you. Because that's one thing I want to get my daughter more involved in, because she's already a little natural leader. So it's safe to say in FY24, I guess I've been conditioned to say that now, 2024, you're not really doing a whole lot. Right. No, I'm joking. That is incredible, man. Your dedication to this country is inspiring. And it always kind of go back to that John Quincy Adams quote of the definition of inspire. And I'll have to look it up. But if your actions inspire others to do more, be more, become more than your leader, and you are the epitome of everything that is good within this country. And I think you said it before, and this was in the opening notes as well, is that you're a patriot to this country. And I think part of being a patriot and living in the greatest country in the world is living in a free country, being able to say what you want, be able to do what you want, be able to start a business because you have the ability to do that. And I think freedom is such a important trait and characteristic that our country has that has to be protected. And I'd love to turn it over to you, because I know you prepared a comment on this of defining what freedom is.
This is my freedom means statement, and it was created for Marty and James Phelps, both Army. One was an Army colonel, the other was Army Special Forces. Green Beret, sorry. But these are two great Americans, and I dedicate them to them, and I dedicated them to you, and I dedicate this to all the different veterans throughout the nation. This is for you, and this is what freedom means to me, but it also is totally dedicated to all of you. Freedom means we live in the greatest nation representing freedom. America loves a winner. America loves the underdog. America loves the comeback kid, and we all have fallen into one of those categories. Regardless which category you are in, all Americans have the freedom to find the strength inside themselves to go on the personal journey for the pursuit of happiness. One then will find the strength inside themselves to achieve their own personal understanding of freedom. May God give strength to our active duty. May God give strength to our U.S. veterans to protect all Americans' pursuit of happiness, to protect all Americans' freedom.
I love that, brother. That's amazing. I usually do a final show segment that I call the Killer Bees, but I don't want to take away from that amazing kind of definition of freedom that you kind of summed up. That's beautiful, and I think that's an absolutely great way to end the show. But before we do, what I'd love to ask is one of those killer bee questions is, how can our listeners find you, and how can they add value to you? Because I know you're doing so much, but how can they find you, and how can they add value to your missions that you have going on?
You can find me on LinkedIn, David Vardeman. You'll see my face, just the same one that you use for the promo. I think the way you bring value is I need support in terms of just spiritual and good wishes, because a lot of what I do is sort of baked in now in terms of my actions. What I need is, people that recognize and appreciate the effort. And if I can get more people like that, and that would just build that everybody needs a little inspiration or a little thank you once in a while. We don't need them very often. Like, I don't think Joshua and I need it very often, but just every once in a while, it just makes the world of difference. Yeah. And, my getting the GI Forum, the American GI Forum, selecting me and allowing me to carry their wreath on
It's
Veterans
amazing.
Day, on the sacred ground of uh, uh, the unknown soldier, was really, really special towards, making my year and also making all the hard work I do worth it.
Yeah.
Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, I'm sorry. But yeah, those walking those sacred steps, very, very few civilians will ever walk it. And
Yeah.
so for me to be honored to do that, that tells me that I'm doing everything right. That tells me that, anybody, if I can do it, anybody can be a U.S. patriot and really deliver what the country needs. And do not think that you are too busy. Do not think that you are too caught up in other important matters. There's nothing
Yeah.
more important. There is nothing more important than giving back and doing the very best for your nation. That will define you. That will live on with you for the rest of your life. So don't throw that opportunity away. Engage it.
Mm. David, this has been an absolutely phenomenal podcast, and I did have a hard stop at
Right?
7:15.
You have to
But
get there.
I will tell you that I didn't even get to a fraction of the questions, and really do a deep dive of all of the amazing stuff that you're doing. So I'm blessed, and I sleep better at night knowing that there's patriots out there like you that are making a change, and working to make this country an even better place, because we do live in the greatest country in the world. And trust me, because I've seen some of what the worst humanity has to offer. And a lot of the problems that we have here are so minute and fractions of what we deal with, that I'm blessed and honored to now have you as a friend, brother. So thank
Yeah.
you for everything that you do.
Thank you too. And what you're doing with the podcast is absolutely amazing. And I think you're on pace to just make a huge difference and
Yeah.
allow the really great Americans to be on. And people should be looking out every week for your videos. And I had to make it a little difficult for Richard the next show.
You got to give me some inside baseball questions to ask him. But
Yeah, I'll email those to you. But he's a great American. Your next show is going to be absolutely
I
stunning.
love it,
So,
brother. Well, hey, have a great night, David, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
all right, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening.
Bye.